On behalf of Comcast NBC Universal, I am truly thrilled to welcome you to this special event at the Free Library. All of you who are here know that this is a bedrock of learning and community building in the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. Philadelphia, of course, holds a special place in the story of America. It is here where bold ideas about democracy, justice, and freedom first took root, ideas that shaped the world for generations. It is also where the other three words also were given life. And I don't mean I love you, I mean we the people. And with those three words, the idea of American citizenship was born alongside the perpetual work of forming a more perfect union. In an age where algorithms often dictate what we see, hear, and read, there's something profoundly important about gathering together like this, to exchange ideas face to face, to turn pages of a book, and to hear stories firsthand. It is a true privilege for us to support the Arthur Event series and institutions like the Free Library that preserve the timeless pursuit of knowledge and appropriately center humans in that pursuit, occasionally with some help from technology. It's also a privilege to welcome to our hometown someone who reminds us that our most important title is that of citizen, and who has spent his life shaping history, championing progress, and offering pragmatic solutions with a big dash of hope. Former President Bill Clinton's memoir is aptly titled Citizens, My Life After the White House. We're so fortunate tonight to have President Clinton in conversation with Jonathan Capehart. And before we bring them to the stage, we're going to show you a very short video. Enjoy the evening.
My days in this office are nearly through, but my days of service, I hope, are not. In the years ahead, I will never hold a position higher or a covenant more sacred than that of President of the United States. But there is no title I will wear more proudly than that of citizen. Thank you.
Serving as president was the highest honor of my life, but the most rewarding role of all is the one that made it all possible, the one I began with, citizen of the United States. Being an American citizen brings profound privileges, but also sacred and shared responsibilities. The privileges are many, and they include the right to express our beliefs without fear, the freedom to shape our fortunes and futures with security and dignity, and the opportunity to take advantage of our many blessings and resources to forge better tomorrows for our families and for all our fellow citizens, whether at home or around the world. Our responsibilities are also many, but they've always hinged on the simple truth that we all do better acting together. That idea was first embodied in America's national motto, E pluribus unum, out of many one, and was adopted for our Great Seal in 1782 by our founders. Our common humanity is where our privileges and our responsibilities as citizens meet. We live in an interdependent world, so one of the ways I've embraced my own citizenship is to do what I can to increase the positive aspects of that interdependence and minimize the negative ones, with shared opportunities as well as obligations. One of the great beauties of American citizenship is that it's an equal opportunity mission. There's a job for everyone who wants one, and always a team that needs new members. Whether you've finished one chapter of your life and are moving on to the next, like I was, or you're just starting out, the title of citizen is always there waiting for us to embrace it. And when we do, there's no limit to what we can accomplish together.
Please welcome to the stage acclaimed journalist Jonathan Capehart and President Bill Clinton.
Yeah. Oh, now you can.
Whoa.
Mr. President, welcome to Philadelphia.
Thank you. I love it here.
So, y'all are gonna have to wait a little while before we get to the part of the conversation I know you're dying to hear. But Mr. President, thank you very much for being here. Congratulations on Citizen, My Life After the White House. What book number is this? How many books have you written now?
7, 8, I don't know.
So,
I'm embarrassed I don't, but I'll stop and count if you want.
no, that's okay. And they're all listed in the front of the book. So, Mr. President, you left the presidency at age 54. That is 3 years younger than I am right now. So I'm just wondering, how did you decide what your post-presidency life was going to look like? Because at 57, I feel like if I were to leave what I'm doing now, I've got at least 2 more careers ahead of me. So how did you decide almost 30-something years ago, what your next act was going to be?
Well, first of all, I started thinking about it after I was reelected. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it in the last term. And also I picked an architect for my presidential library. I picked a design. I thought about a lot of things. I decided I wanted to have a school of public service, not a school of public policy where people would spend half their time in the field working to actually solve problems and do things. And it's still the only graduate school in America that does that. And nobody paid any attention to it for 20 years because I had a very conservative legislature who didn't want to give me any more money. So we just kind of worked around and maintained good relations with them and kept doing what we were doing. And then we got all the rating agencies in and we just showed them what we were doing. We went up 39 spots in 1 year, and I didn't think you could do that without spending any more money or doing anything. So that shows you that it's still important to get the message out there, not just in politics. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to do that, but the most important thing I thought I could do is to get people together across lines that often divide them to do good things together and to get more people to keep score the way I do, which is, are people better off when you quit? The children have a brighter future, and are we pulling together instead of being blown apart? I think those are the 3 most important considerations that are other directed in life. You can measure your life by just how happy you are by what you do from the time you wake up till the time you go to sleep. And that's perfectly legitimate. But if you want to be politically effective, then you can measure, as I do, or you can measure as others do who now think I'm a fool, which is, are you in total control? Can you fire anybody that questions you? You're laughing, but no, this is serious. And can you maintain your control by compromising the courts and other institutions? So the people who feel that way would say they keep score better than I do because if you're not in, you can't do any of that other good stuff. So this book, one of the reasons I wrote this book is to prove that, oh yes, you can. You can do a lot of that other good stuff. You can make people better off when you start than when you stop. I mean, when you stopped than when you started. You can give children a brighter future. You can bring people together instead of tearing them apart. And that's basically the big argument we're having now. What is the purpose of power? And is it to lift up or make you feel better by being able to whack whoever you want to?
So you're already treading down that road. I was hoping to hold off because you got everyone on the edge of their seat. Like, keep going. But we have to stick to your point about measuring. The first 2/3 of the book, and I've read the whole thing. The president is a nerd, which you all know. But you catalog a lot of things, probably not even everything that you've done through the Clinton Foundation, Clinton Global Initiative. But when you tell us, when you write about what you, meaning the foundation and everyone who works for it, has done, you talk about how much money was raised, how many people you helped, how many lives you saved, how many doses you were able to get out in terms of antiretroviral drugs for HIV/AIDS. You talk about a lot of programs and a lot of things that you've done. Is there one program or initiative that you started or helped to start or have fostered that is the one that is most dear to you?
Well, I think what we did in the beginning with AIDS, because when I left office, we had tripled the funding America was providing, but it was still only went from $200 million to $600 million. It was nowhere near enough. But we had done well, and I had a Congress of the other party, and I thought we were doing okay. And we had also laid the groundwork for the Global Fund on AIDS, TB, and malaria. But it wasn't stood up until shortly after I left office. So I wanted to see it through. And Mandela, with whom I had become very close over the previous 8 or 9 years, was already out of office when I left. And he was willing for us to go around and be the honorary chairs of an international AIDS trust, which is a fancy way of saying we'd go visit rich countries and rich people and rattle a tin cup and try to raise more money for AIDS. And then, but I knew that the Global Fund was starting and that President Bush had promised that the definition, the embodiment of his compassionate conservative commitment was going to be PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And I realized he was very serious about it and was going to do it. So what Mandela and I wound up doing was trying to direct the money to the right countries as quickly as possible and then maximizing the impact of it. And I got pretty good at it. I always had kind of an instinct of thinking about not what most politicians talk about. How much money are you going to spend, whether it's a program or a tax cut? And what do you intend to do with it? And the most important thing is, however much money you have or don't, how do you propose to do whatever it is to achieve the objective you say you're going to achieve? Answering the how question is the biggest problem in politics and in charity. And so I decided that I'd spend a great chunk of the rest of my life trying to help people of good faith without regard to party or what country they were from, answer the how question.
How concerned are you that PEPFAR will not be reauthorized? Because it needs to be reauthorized by March of next year. And there's already noise about that not happening. How big of a mistake would that be?
Huge. It would, I don't know why, but there are some people in the other party that seem to think that the more offensive we are to other people, the more influential we'll be. And that why should we care whether they live or die? But the truth is, George W. Bush has been out of office long enough for us to know that this is his most important enduring legacy. And that there are plenty of people who now, although they remain opposed to the Iraq War, are willing to cut him some slack because so many people's lives have been saved through PEPFAR. And I've got in this book, and with his permission, because I never talk about what other presidents say to me. I never have, and I shouldn't, unless I get specific permission. But I call, George Bush and I went to Pope John Paul's funeral. And he called me, and I was with his dad and several other people. And he called me up to the president's cabinet on Air Force One and said, I want to talk about your AIDS work. Tell me what you're doing. So I explained to him what we were doing and how we were serving people. And I told him how many people we were serving and where we raised the money. And I asked him if I could talk to him about this, and I said, I won't tell anybody, but I'd have to say this. And he said, sure. I said, I think you should consider using generic medicine, because we do, and we can serve 2, 3, 4 times as many people as you can, even though our staff costs may be the same, just on the medicine. And he said, well, our guys say it's not any good, the pharmaceutical advisors. And I said, don't they say really it's only 60% as effective? He said, yeah, they do. I said, they tried that on me, and I told them that they should stop making that argument because it was 10 times as expensive. So if it was 60% as effective, we'd still be saving a lot more lives with this medicine. And I said, I kind of felt bad that you could make these charges and not even have to do arithmetic anymore. And I may miss those times now pretty soon. But anyway, I said, how about this? I said, what if I took every medicine we put in any human body and gave it to the Food and Drug Administration to approve if it's safe and effective or disapprove? I said, if I did that, would you tell all the countries you work in, which then was only about 7, I said, would you tell them that if they want to use the money that the United States gives them on these drugs, they could? And I mean, Bush didn't blink. He said, that sounds like a fair deal to me, which is not what anybody would have thought would have happened at the time, because he was still pretty well reeling from the Iraq War and the unpopularity of it and other problems. But what that meant was that he really was serious about this being his embodiment of what it was to be a compassionate conservative. And if he could save more lives with the same amount of money without doing something stupid, because the evidence supported he would. And so I turned the stuff over. Before you know it, 22 of the 24 medicines that we used on people, including all the main ones, were almost immediately approved. And the Bush administration sent a notice to the people in these countries. And before you know it, instead of 7 countries, he was involved in 15 countries with more people in each country without spending 1 red cent of tax dollars that he wasn't spending before by making that. And that's what I spent a lot of time doing in the last 25 years. I try to figure out how to do things faster, cheaper, and better. And so when Elon Musk talks about how he's going to be the master of efficiency, I think we ought to regularly review all of our government operations. But I don't think we ought to use it to make rhetorical hay. I think we ought to use it to make substantive progress. And because I think, and you know, Al Gore had a reinventing government initiative, which I was very proud of, and it enabled me to take your tax money, those of you who are American citizens, and make it go further. And when I left office, the federal workforce was the same size it was in Dwight Eisenhower's last year as president. And yet we were producing more things by being more efficient about the way we used technology and lots of other things. So if your goal is to improve public service and save money for the taxpayers, that's one thing. But a lot of people just like to badmouth government and government employees, and I think that's a mistake. Because most people in the government would like to be more efficient with your money. And they want to be well led, and they welcome new opportunities, and I think we should find more. But anyway, I'm big on what George Bush did that day, because a lot of people wouldn't have done it, because he had all these pharmaceutical companies for him, and they helped him win the election, and he still did the right thing.
And you can read that particular story the president just said on page 169 when you get your when you get your book. Let me get you on one more nerdy thing before we turn to Clinton Global Initiative. You, late in life, got into physics.
Astrophysics, yep.
Why?
and a lot of other physics. I don't know. I had free times. You know, Hillary had a full-time job, and I had free time, and I'd always been interested in how things work. And I got. It bothered me that I didn't really understand basic physics. So I started reading, you know, Brian Greene, Lisa Randall, a lot of other people. And I wanted to know, because almost everybody believes now in physics that the world started. Our whole universe is right at 14 billion years old, a little shade less. And then it started with a Big Bang. And then our planet and solar system more or less 4 billion years old. So it came along quite a bit later. We know the universe is expanding, and there are now more than 1 billion galaxies. And we know all of this stuff is affecting us even when we don't quite understand how. So I've just been trying to master it, to figure it out. And I've become particularly And I also, late in my presidency, I became friends with the late Stephen Hawking, who a lot of you know about, and I found one of the most impressive men I ever met. He lived longer with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, than any person ever had. And he was something. But anyway, and I learned a lot reading his books. So I just kept digging in the dirt of it, and eventually I became quite captivated by the Italian astrophysicist Carlo Rovelli, who works, I think, out of Germany now, but he's written several books, 3 of which I've read. One was 7 Elementary Lessons in Physics. One was a book about particle physics. I mean, not particle. Anyway, it's called Helgoland. And one is a wonderful little book of essays called There Are Places in the World Where Kindness is More Important Than Rules. And so I just got into all this. And I think that I try to learn something new, however insignificant, every day. And it keeps you going, you know. You got to keep your old noggin going. And it's fun.
I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it on the physics. Let's talk about the Clinton Global Initiative. Because on the one hand, you told the story about doing good around the world. But Clinton Global Initiative, sort of bubbled up, and this is my characterization, out of a bit of frustration with the World Economic Forum crowd, who meet every year, talk about the problems, and then disperse. And when you devised Clinton Global Initiative, you turned that on its head. Talk about why you did that, and what is the purpose of Clinton Global Initiative when people get together in New York during United Nations General Assembly?
First of all, I did go. I think I was the first sitting president to go to Davos, late in my second term. And after I left, I went 3 or 4 more times, and I had a wonderful time. And usually, Shimon Peres and we were called upon to host a big thing at night, and we talked. But it was fascinating. There were a lot of fascinating people there. People talked about everything under the sun. But in the beginning, nobody was asked to do anything. And I was always frustrated about that. Even when I was running for office and I knew speaking was important, I thought speaking was a door to doing. And so we decided after some ins and outs that I and the people that were willing to help me would try to organize a meeting not unlike Davos, to start at the beginning, basically the opening of the UN for 2.5 to 3 days. And we would ask everybody who came to commit that they would agree, after studying what the issues at stake were, they would make a commitment to do something. And it was pretty much that simple. And I thought, I'm gotta be crazy. Why would anybody pay a membership fee to come to New York City during the UN week when it's chokingly crowded, to go to a meeting that wants you to spend more time and money to do something good for somebody else? I just had a feeling that too many people were tired of going to meetings where we talked things to death and nobody ever had to do anything. But it was a blind guess, really. And that's how it started. And it turned out we had all kinds of people who wanted to make a difference. One man from New Jersey, who's now a very active and sophisticated charitable philanthropist, called and said, I've saved up $100,000 and I don't want to be made a fool of when I give it away. I don't know if I can give it away right. So we introduced him to a woman named Majora Carter from Brooklyn, whom you may have known. I don't, but she came home to Brooklyn, to the poorest congressional district in America, which had almost no green space for the kids, and they built a parkway. And they needed somebody to maintain it and to finish it out, but it was beautiful. So it went from being a dump where there was too much garbage into a totally redesigned urban area in the poorest congressional district in America. And she was willing to do a lot of this work, hire the staff, train them, and do all this stuff. So we put them together, this guy, and he loved it, and he wound up giving her even more money and keeping doing it year in and year out. That's just one example. Mm-hmm. And, you know, then I wound up getting involved in all these disasters. Usually a president would ask me, or the UN would ask. Sometimes a foreign leader would ask my help. But in the end, we would normally, no matter what the government gave, have to raise more money. So I wound up using the foundation as a receptor, an actor, to do things in Indonesia after the tsunami, in New Orleans after Katrina, and along the coast, in Haiti after the earthquake, and then in the Caribbean and in Texas and Florida after the horrible multiple hurricanes in 2017. And it was great because it didn't matter what was going on in the outside world. Nobody cared about partisan politics. They just wanted to get something done. And I have loved all these things. And I remember we raised a huge amount of money for Haiti over and above what the emergency donations were. Just through the Clinton Global Initiative, another $500-something million. And people, and I put in the book, as you pointed out, what the money went to. And I swear, as late as 2021, we were still getting money for Haiti, in spite of the fact that the president had been killed, and everybody knew that these gangs had taken over the streets and the airports and were likely to kill people. But anybody who'd ever worked there knew that if you knew how to spend it, there were completely honest, totally reliable people there who would save lives and do things. So, and I caught the Haiti bug 49 years ago when I went there after Hillary and I got married. A friend of ours worked for Citibank down there and brought us down on a wedding trip. And I never quite got rid of it. But the point is, I set up this organization, the foundation, so it could have a broad mission of basically solving the problems and seizing the opportunities of the 21st century world and doing it in a way that operated faster, better, at lower cost. So we can pretty much do anything that we have the money to do. And it's been a joy to work in tough places.
So speaking of joy in tough places, let's look at what's happening here at home. And in your book, you write, this is on page 399, by the time you read Citizen, we'll know who won. I hope enough people will have chosen the benefits of inclusive economic and social policies and of preserving democracy against abusive power to turn the tide. Donald Trump is now president-elect. Is his election a rejection of inclusive economic and social policies, a rejection of preserving democracy?
I don't think so, but he will interpret it that way. I don't think so because, number one, he's going to wind up with less than 50% of the vote. And it'll show us pretty much evenly divided. What happened in the Electoral College, I wanted to believe that it wouldn't necessarily happen, but it was entirely predictable because the Vice President, Kamala Harris, I think performed quite well, given where she started and how little time she had. But she only had 107 days. I know that seems like a long time, and you may think, well, that's an advantage in some ways. They don't have time to slam you as much, but she was still a stranger to people, and therefore extremely vulnerable to negative characterizations. You think, well, 107 days, that's a lot. And look at all the money she raised. But in my opinion, what happened was she got back the votes that had been lost in the debate and in people saying President Biden wouldn't be able to serve 4 more years. And then they were pretty much even in fighting to the end. There were 4 or 5% of the voters who didn't want or weren't wedded to voting for President Trump, but weren't wedded to voting for Democrats either. A lot of them were upset about the cost of living problems, or they had some other problem. And in the middle, you had Kamala Harris, who did a heck of a job in the debate, which is why her opponent declined to give her any more debates, which it was smart of him. So that's what happened. And then they kept, the Republicans are geniuses at sowing doubt and giving sort of advanced buyer's remorse. And also, she couldn't have been ready on the first day to answer all the questions, tell us specifically and with great detail what are going to be the differences between you and Joe Biden. For example, that's what I think happened. And so I don't think we should give up our stand for democracy or inclusion. If you look at all these positions, they basically boil down to 2 things. One is, do you think it's more important for us to find ways to work together, or more important to keep supporters who are prepared to foam at the mouth because nothing ever gets done and they're frustrated? Do you think our differences are more important or our common humanity? Do you think we should all live under the same set of rules, or do you want one set of rules for your side and another set for the other? And politics is almost the only part of our life, really, except for some people feel this way about money, where we want a different set of rules for our side and another one for the other. I mean, we're basically in the teeth of the football season now. And we just had the World Series. And now we're going to have the football playoffs and championships. And then the pro season will end and we'll move to the Super Bowl. And pro basketball has just started again, and we're already calculating what's going to happen there. In every case, there is excitement because we think that all these teams are going to take the field playing under the same set of rules. And we know that the referees and the umpires are flawed. They're human. But we've got systems that are supposed to help us correct if the umps or the refs make a bad call. It happens. Nobody's perfect. Politics is the only thing we play where particularly the hard right doesn't think we should live under the same set of rules. And that's what's tearing us up, and we're going to have to resolve it one way or the other.
You write in the book, I'm going to read several passages here. The right wing has been richly rewarded for making every contest a battle in an endless culture war. I grew up in the segregated South of the 1950s and 60s, so I was raised on this stuff and know its power. You also write, the far right is brilliant at this sort of branding, hyping our racial, ethnic, gender, regional, religious, and cultural differences and denying our common humanity. And you also write, and this is relevant to what you just said, today we have a, quote, a culture war on steroids. There are no facts, only opinions. The truth is whatever helps you. If facts hurt you, they're lies. You ask a question in the book that I wonder if you have an answer to it, and that is, how did Republicans, you wrote they, how did Republicans, I don't know what's happening. How did Republicans convince swing voters that they had more to lose from phantom Democrats than real Republicans? You haven't?
I said that because I was referring to their unusual skill at being able to make it look like all the Democrats support whatever the most left-wing position is held by any member of our party. Whereas apparently now 90% of the Republicans actually do support the most right-wing positions of their party. And they're just great at it. And I don't know whether it's botherism in the news coverage or the emotional power of negative news or the seething resentment of people who feel that they have been sidelined in the social hierarchy or the economic hierarchy too long. I'm not quite sure, but I know they're good at it. And my view is, if we want to be competitive over the long run, we have to be much more comfortable than we have been in going out and let people scream at us if that's what they want to do. You got to go talk to people. Now, it's much harder. When I first ran for Congress 50 years ago, God, I can't believe that. Anyway, so I was running against a Republican who had 85% approval and 95% name recognition in one of the most rural districts in the country where we had the highest use of gasoline for a registered vehicle in the United States. And a majority of the people in my entire native state of Arkansas were living in communities of fewer than 5,000 people. So the town I was born in was a big town. There were 6,000 people there. And I got in a car, which was an old modified Chevrolet Camaro pickup truck.
I'm sorry, what? Camaro pickup truck.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing. Go on.
We cut down the back part of it and put in a bed because I needed a pickup. Okay, so, and I just drove from one place to the next. I'd stopped along the way in cow pastures and stepped over barbed wire to go shake hands with people. And I dealt with, it was a different time, but there was still a lot of tribalism, a lot of anger, but nobody had ever worked as hard as I did in that district. And like I said, the guy I was running against was an incumbent with 85% approval, 95% name recognition. And it was a conservative district. And the newspapers, here's the difference. I'm coming to the difference. Here's the difference. A lot of these papers and local radio stations were owned by Republicans. But if you showed up, they were glad to see you. You know, you gave them something to write about, something to report on, and you would get a totally straight interview. And you could go into any country cafe, and the radio was on the local news station, and the local paper, a weekly or a daily, was on every table in the cafe. Now, the dailies are almost all gone in small places, and some of them don't even have weeklies anymore. And nobody's got a locally owned radio station anymore. And they're on Fox News from the time that people open till they close. And it's a different world. But you still, if you want to play, you still got to go see them. And I had the best time in this election, even though we didn't win, and I was just one guy going out along toward the end of the road. But I could tell that there was a lot of people that came to me and said nice things. There were guys wearing MAGA hats asking to take pictures. In other words, you may have a preconceived notion that all these people are way out here to the right and can't wait to hurt you. And President Trump has got a big decision to make about whether to confirm that preconceived notion or truly unify all the people who voted for him and the people that might have. So I don't know what's going to happen. All I'm saying is it starts with us talking to people and getting off our high horse and them getting off their high horse and seeing another person there. There's, you know, I printed all these rules of politics in my book, and one of them is if you scratch anyone long enough, you almost always find a person down there. And they may have done a hell of a job of hiding themselves, but they're probably still there somewhere. And you just don't have the option of giving up on it. You just got to keep going.
I want to get there's a lot of wonderful things about your book. One is your rules of politics. Another is your critique of the media, the way they covered Secretary Clinton's first campaign for president in 2008, how they covered it in 2016. But you also have like really fun little asides about people. Here's what about National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, when you had a speech, you were invited to give a speech in Hong Kong, and being a former president, you called and said, like, is this okay? And you say, you called Condoleezza Rice to get the administration's approval. Quote, I said, you know your side bankrupted me when I was in office, and I need this speech. But I'm an American first. If you don't want me to go, just say so and I'll cancel. The other choice is to have me deliver a message from the White House to President Chiang. I know we just have one president at a time. Just tell me what you want me to say and I'll do it. You wrote, Condi chuckled at the bankruptcy line because she knew it was true and I was clearly ready to can the speech. They let you go. They allowed you to go. That story made me chuckle because it speaks to a different time
Yeah.
in America, but also in American politics. Talk to us a little bit more about that before I talk about Gaddafi.
Well, what happened, that's when, some of you have to be a certain age to remember this, but right about the time I left office, and President George W. Bush's first few weeks, you may remember this, an American fighter plane crashed on an island off the coast of China. It didn't get shot down. There was some sort of malfunction and it crashed. But he and the then president of China, Jiang Zemin, who was a friend of mine and was, I think, very different and better for our relationship than President Xi has been, partly because Xi has decided that he wants to be a Chinese nationalist and stay forever, or for a long time, and it complicates politics. But anyway, so in all this maelstrom, I was invited to speak. And by a Canadian friend of mine who had a business in Hong Kong, and it was a nice speaking fee, and I didn't need the money. Those of you who remember know that I was bankrupt in the whole Whitewater thing. And I had a good relationship with Condi because she had been the chancellor at Stanford when my daughter was an undergraduate there. And she had been really kind to her. She went out of her way to make sure that her privacy was not abused and that she had as normal a college career as possible. And, you know, you do something for our children, we generally appreciate it. And she did a fine job. So I didn't feel like there's any need to beat around the bush. I said, you know, and she knew what I said was perfectly true. So she called me back in about a half an hour and said, the president wants you to go. And I think it was an example of, A, they were pleased that I called and asked. B, I provided them a way to send a message to the president of China with very little downside if it didn't work. And it started a whole relationship with me and George W. Bush. And we became great friends. And he always hated me because I beat his dad, and I didn't blame him. I mean, I called him once and I said, look, I know, right after I got there, actually in this, when they wanted me to do it. And after I did it, he called and thanked me, because it was a hilarious conversation when I told President Jiang was a very good guy, I think. And I said, look, we got to talk about this plane. He said, oh, no, we don't. This is not nearly as bad as when you blew up my embassy in Belgrade during the Kosovo War. And I said, well, then why are you being so cold-blooded about this? He said, you spy on us and we spy on you. Your spy plane went down on my island. You know I didn't shoot it down. I said, I know. We all know that. He said, so you can't blame me for taking a look at it. He said, you're spying on me and I'm supposed to protect your technology when I can take a look at it? He said, what is this? And I said, he said, I appreciate you calling. Tell me what you want, and I'll do it. I said, I want you to give us the plane back, and I'll have President Bush call you, and you'll get off to a better start. So he did it, and Bush called and thanked him, and they got along fine after that. And I you know, a lot of this stuff you just have to let go.
This one also made me chuckle. You mentioned your daughter Chelsea a moment ago. And this is quoting from the book. Gaddafi was in an expansive mood and suggested we should arrange a marriage between his son and Chelsea and launch a dynasty. Without laughing, I explained that in our culture, the decision was my daughter's, not mine. But I would relay his proposal as soon as I got home. But wait, there's more. When I did, Chelsea, also straight-faced, said, "Dad, I think I'll pass." I mean, I know you said without laughing, but come on, man. What was your reaction when Gaddafi said this to you?
Well, first of all, we had fended each other off during my years as president. We had all kinds of occasional clashes over issues, and could have been much worse. But I knew he was in a period when he was trying to transform himself from a Middle Eastern radical to an African statesman, which he did try to do for a while. And he had a son who was trying to help him and encourage him to get rid of all the nuclear stuff and all that and try to work out a relationship with the West. So what this was about was we happened to be in Nigeria at a World African AIDS Conference. And he was, again, trying to reposition himself as an African. So he was trying to put some money into this effort. Mandela and I were organizing against AIDS. And I wanted to keep him in a good humor, but I didn't want to imply that my daughter was looking for a dowry. And so he got it fine. He was not as unaware as he.
Wait, you relayed the message to Chelsea?
Yeah, I said, Chelsea, I promised I'd do this.
And
here it is.
And did you then, what you don't write is, did you call him back or send word, or you just let it?
What I did was I had an aide call his aide to avoid embarrassing him. See, if I'd called him back, it might have embarrassed him. I just said, but I told him, I said, in our culture, the woman gets to make the decision. And my daughter is very strong-willed, but I will faithfully relay this. And I faithfully related. And Chelsea chose Marjorie's son instead. It was out there. My son-in-law's mother was out there along with his brother and a nephew. Mm-hmm. So Marjorie Meslinsky, thank you. And I loved it. I mean, it was the whole thing. Gaddafi was I remember once Hosni Mubarak, when he was still president of Egypt, called me, he said, "You think Gaddafi's crazy, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "You're right." He said, "But what you don't understand is that they're all crazy and that Gaddafi is the sanest of all his crew. So you should just get used to working with him."
Mr. President, we've got a little less than 7 minutes. And I've got about 14 questions that we're never going to be able to get to them. But I want to bring you back to the founders. You wrote, all our presidents could be best understood by how they defined the two key ideas in the preamble to the Constitution. Who are we the people, and what does a more perfect union mean? And I love that framing, because that is going to come in handy the next 4 years. But my question for you is, and this is a bit of self-interest here, because this is part of a project that I'm working on at the Washington Post for the 250th anniversary of the country. If the founders came back, would they say they got it right or they got it wrong?
I think they would say so far they got it right, because we've been through several crises since the beginning, which could have torn the country apart. And yet we found a way to go on and to go on together. but I think they would acknowledge that we are now at a new inflection point, and it's hard to be certain how it's going to come out. Partly because of the way we communicate now, through spending too much time on our phones and doing all the stuff we do, and the incredible skill that the sowers of doubt and discord have developed in making us feel resentment and making us feel our differences are far more important than what we have in common. And making us think, as you see in this whole appointment process, that nobody and nothing has any real legitimacy, any inherent, validity or anchor to it. So I think if the framers came and did a look-see today, they'd say, we'll see in a couple of years and tell you what we think. That's what I think would happen. And because, look, don't forget, we're still the best positioned country in the world for the 21st century. And one of the reasons we are, and this is one of the challenges that President Trump will have to navigate, one of the reasons we're the best positioned in the world is there's somebody here from everywhere. And this is a very international economy that we're living in. And we have a very low birth rate now. We're below replacement. So we've got no shot without immigrants to maintain our competitive position. So we all need to work together. Now, we had an agreement between President Biden and the Republican Senate, to basically get rid of the backlog in immigration appeals and all of that and have an orderly process. And during the presidential campaign, that didn't work for their candidate because he got as his bread and butter was a problem, not a solution. But now the election's over, so it's going to be interesting to see whether we can leave the problem and go to the solution. But I think look what's fixing to happen. We've already got 60,000 infrastructure projects out there. Soon be 100. We've got huge numbers of the computer chips projects, which President Biden sponsored. And they're going to bring a massive amount of income and jobs to this country. And so far, our allegedly biased party has given well over half of these new projects to places in red America, not blue America. Because we don't believe in sticking it to people, and we're still trying to find a way to work together. So when all this happens, we're going to get a huge infusion of growth. And I hope it will reduce the pressure to be blindly anti-immigrant and instead think about how we can have a non-chaotic controlled border, which nearly everybody wants. So that's what I think is going to happen. I don't think we can know the answer to your question now, but we should concentrate on getting rid of the immigration backlog, having an orderly border, and stop pretending we don't need immigrants and don't need to treat them right, because we do. We're not going to get there if we don't.
This is the last question, but I hope y'all aren't in a rush. You write in the book, on February January 19th, 2017, when I was 72 years and 6 months old, I became the longest living person in my family for 3 generations since my great-grandparents. And I bring that up because here's another passage that you write earlier in the book, but it is among, I've heard you say this phrasing many times, that you write, when you have more yesterdays than tomorrow, living in the present and for the future requires nurturing good memories and making peace with the less happy ones. But forgetting some things is also important. A couple of years ago, I read Scott Small's brilliant short book, Forgetting: The Benefits of Not Remembering, which explains why, as we age, we need to free space in our minds to make better decisions. What have you decided to forget? Because it doesn't sound like anything, but is there something you've decided to forget, to free up space?
I believe, as you referred twice, that this wouldn't have happened, none of this, if Hillary had been elected in 2016. None of it. I believe she was voted 19 times the most admired woman in America, and all of a sudden she's a scourge and an elitist and all this. I believe that both the Shorenstein School at Harvard and the Columbia Journalism College are right that she was hurt far more by mainstream media coverage about how scandalous her emails were, which was false. It wasn't overdone, it was false. That's what I believe. Now, I was so mad about that I was impossible to be around for more than a year. And I had to apologize. In this book, I apologize to any of you who had to put up with my anger. But I just felt sick that it happened because I knew President Trump pretty well. And I had a very good relationship with him, but I knew this was a danger, what has happened. And once I just laid out what I thought and why, and cited the authorities on which I based my opinions, I got well. I stopped thinking about it all the time. It's not good to be eat up with it. But since I think there are still too many people in the press who are in organized denial, I kept trying, and it's stupid. I got to let it go. And Scott Small's book, Forgetting, is very good, and he points out something that I was almost, well, I'm what age I am, before I learned it. He says it's not true that we only use 10% of our brain power. We use a lot more than that. And that's just a myth. And so once you get to be a certain age, if your head is crammed full of stuff and your brain is slowly shrinking every year, which it is, it has been for decades for me, which you gotta find a place, you gotta flush some of those memories so they have enough capacity. It's for me to keep thinking about particle physics and stuff, whatever. And I think that's important. So I have tried to let a lot of things go that I forget, that I'm angry about, and realize no matter what, but I and Hillary and our daughter and son-in-law and grandchildren, our whole crowd, we are as lucky as can be. We are lucky that we got to live as many years as we did in an America not torn by the kind of divisions we're being threatened with today. We're lucky. So you just got to get up every day and try to make something good happen. That's my advice. That's why I really wrote this, so you could see the power that philanthropy could have, even if you're not rich, or even if you don't have a big thing, that there's something we can all do to make the world a better place. And we don't have to wait till the next election, and we don't have to just spend time belly aching. We need to figure out how we can make something good happen and reach out to people that are different from us. I had so much fun at the Georgia State Fair with those guys in their MAGA hats asking for pictures. You know, and they asked me the damnedest things. I mean, how can you still be a Democrat? I said, how can you not? But the point is, you got to get, if you can make somebody laugh, they will listen then. And you need to think, but we just, finally, if we're motivated by love of our fellow human beings, we will not take no for an answer, and will not let this amazing example of human ingenuity be destroyed by people who are just here for a little while, just like the rest of us.
And with that, we're going to leave it there. William Jefferson Clinton, 42nd President of the United States, thank you very much.